Hey, how you doing, sir?
Hey, all right.
I had stopped by here just to exit. Saw cars and I stopped in. I'm assuming you're
Yeah.
a witness. Yeah, I was raised in it myself. Yes, sir. And my mother and my sister are still Jehovah's Witnesses today, and I come by for a couple reasons. One of them was I wanted to spread a little bit of awareness, and my mother married a ministerial servant when I was real little, and I got raped and beaten for 10 years
Oh, yeah.
by him.
Oh, wow.
And he also had another ministerial servant buddy that would sometimes join in. And in the hall I grew up in Lewiston, Maine, I knew of 10 other kids going through what I went through by elders and ministerial servants. And it's so sad to me that happened.
Yeah, that is sad.
The issue I have, I hadn't even looked at Jehovah's Witnesses or thought of them in decades. I'm retired from the Army now. That shows you how long I've been away.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I left as a teenager, and I was like, see ya, you know?
Right.
So, the crazy thing is my life experience. I went through some crap, but I was even at the Pentagon on 9/11. I've been to war. And I've been able to see God's hand in my life and other people's lives outside of just Jehovah's Witnesses, like I was raised. But that's a whole separate issue. But the thing I wanted to bring awareness on is just that the child abuse, I think, is a bigger problem within Jehovah's Witnesses than most people realize, because I know how to vet intel, because I did missions in the Army. I did mission planning. I ran missions. You know what I mean? And so I know how to check out information to see if it's real or not. And I found all kinds of court cases where the Jehovah's Witnesses have kind of covered up child abuse a little bit. I know that's not easy to hear, and you probably don't want to believe it.
No, I've looked into it, and matter of fact, I watched one of the court cases.
There was one in Montana in November. $35 million a year donations went to the abuse victims.
Yeah, I heard about that, and
Did you?
One of them I looked at. One of the things that a lot of people.
I'm Will, by the way. I'm sorry.
Marvin.
Marvin, good to meet you, man.
Yeah, one of the things that it's 8 million of us,
Yes, sir.
8 million. And so there's always going to be some bad ones. In fact, we got some cases where the children are killing the parents. Then that just happened in Chesapeake. One of the children killed his dad. And then we got one of the brothers, baptized brother, comes home and shoot his wife. Stuff happens. All of us were still humans.
And that could have happened to me too. The only reason my rape stopped is because I brought my stepfather within an inch of his life when I was 14 or 15, something like that. I came so close to killing that man. So who knows what the reasons are, right? But I'm sorry, I interrupted. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, and so it's not a secret. We are very aware that in certain congregations in different areas that the people are doing things that they should not be doing. And in fact, what happens, people get upset when it's not reported.
Yes, sir.
But
they should.
They can still go to the authorities themselves and report it. And so what happens is the elders are not under obligation to report it.
Not in Virginia.
Right, in Virginia.
In a lot of places they are.
So
there's actually legislation going through right now because they're in session, January in Richmond. And there's legislation going through right now to make it mandatory reporting. And that's what happened in the Montana case, is it's mandatory reporting in all of Montana. And this is the thing that is so sad for those poor elders that were there, right? Because they got a letter from headquarters, and that's why the case was $35 million. That's why it was so big. Because they got a letter from headquarters, and I read the court documents. I didn't go on the news. I actually went into this public domain knowledge. So I went in and found the court documents themselves and read the evidence, read the proceedings, which takes way too long. Because I didn't want to believe a lot of this stuff either. You know what I mean? Granted, I walked away, but I still you don't want to believe that about something. You know what I mean? And the thing about it is those elders in Montana got a letter from headquarters saying don't report it. Well, in Montana, when it's mandatory reporting, they held those elders responsible in that judicial committee. And so those elders now have to pay $1 million out of their pockets, out of their assets. They might have to sell their houses. I don't know how much money they have. But because it was mandatory reporting in that state, they held not only the organization itself responsible, but the elders responsible for not reporting, because it was mandatory. Like, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? If Caesar's law is report child abuse, then you have to. And I understand Virginia, they don't have to report it.
But they're not saying don't report it though. I don't know why the elders didn't tell the people to go ahead and go to the authorities themselves and tell the authorities what happened to them. And that's what everybody should do anyway. So if someone came to them and says, the child says, okay, this man is raping me, then the elder can say, well, we can't handle that. We can deal with him, but we can't deal with the law with it.
That's the way it should be. Yeah, it should be. Yeah, they should report it. They shouldn't know how to handle it, right? Because they're not sex abuse counselors.
Right.
Like, and you know what happened to me? At 13, I reported it to my elders.
Did you?
At 13. And you know what they tried to do? They tried to hit me for immorality for partaking in this homosexual act. At 13.
Oh.
Now, that shows you someone there is corrupt.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something ain't right there.
More than likely, those guys are not around anymore.
I hope not. Well, because then my mom left my stepfather for like a few months. And then she got advisement from headquarters in a letter to the elders and to her saying that she had no grounds for divorce. And so then I got to go live with my rapist for another 2 more years.
Did it continue?
Yeah.
Where is he now?
Dead.
What happened to him?
He died.
Oh, okay. See, stuff comes to those that do stuff like that.
I agree with that.
But then let me see, because you look at the guys that were with Jesus, the 12, of all people, you with the Son of God, and Judas decides to do something crazy. And so you got guys in these buildings that in the back of their head, there could be something going on. And they could be in here for a whole wrong reason. And some of them come in, and the Bible speaks of in the last days, there will be men that will rise among you that will speak twisted things to draw away disciples out themselves.
Oh, yes, sir. I was reading that in the Bible just the other. See, that's where conversations make me wonder sometimes if God's not involved. Because I was reading that just the other day, 2 John 7, where it talks about there's going to be deceivers coming to you in your midst, right? And you bring in the same thing. And the amazing thing is that was actually combating the 1st and 2nd century Gnosticism. Did you know about that? What Gnosticism is? Okay, so it's a different Jesus, right?
Yeah.
It's they put forward a different Jesus. And like in Colossians 2, 4, and 5, and then 2 Corinthians 11, Colossians 2, 9, and 2 Corinthians, I think 11, 9, or 11, 4. Numbers, right? It gets mixed up, right? But it's all talking about a different Jesus, like a different Jesus from the Bible. And every time it brings up that, in the Greek, it's antichristos, like it's an antichrist. And in Greek, an antichrist is a substitute Christ. You're putting a Christ in place of. It's not, a lot of people have a misconception like it's an opposite, but it's really how much to deceive. If the elect can be deceived in the end, the devil's going to change that small amount, right?
Right.
And like, he didn't go to Eve and Adam and Eve and say, hey, I'm going to, look, that's not what God said. He said, did you really say that? Or is that what he meant?
He used God's words and twisted it a little bit.
Exactly, yes. So we'll agree on that all day long. And so it's amazing that when you look at the Gnostic heresies back in the 1st and 2nd century in the early church, which Paul was writing about and writing against, is that was actually like a pre-Christian ideas that is seeped in to the early church. And what it is, Gnosticism is a belief that there's a lesser God, like a demigod that created the earth, and that there's that Jesus didn't have divineness in him, like Colossians says, where that divinity dwelled in fullness in him, like in his body. And because they were saying that God didn't come in the flesh, as in he didn't have that, like being in very nature God, he chose not to reach for the position of the Father, so that God in nature, like me and you are human in nature, he was God nature according to Colossians, right? And so it's crazy that then you look at the Gnostic heresies also, there was a select group of people that would have the knowledge, that were in touch with that higher power, that God of theirs. There was only a few people at the top that had that special knowledge, and everyone else couldn't know it. unless they talk to these few select people. And that's what the Gnostic heresy was, because in the Bible it says it's for everyone, that we all have a direct line to God through Jesus, right? And I'm sorry, I got way off on that. But,
no, that's interesting stuff.
That's why I got excited about, because I was just reading about that, and that's where I think you can see little things where I think God works that helps open your mind about stuff. You know what I mean?
It helps.
Like, and
I'm very open-minded. I don't close people off, because some people might tell you that, oh, this is not happening, or it's not what you think, but it is happening. This stuff does happen, and people are doing things. There are men that are beating their wives. They can come right here every Sunday, and you think they're the epitome of Christian, but they go home and beat the wife up. Stuff like that is going on. But it doesn't mean that God is not watching. In fact, Revelation says that Jesus' eyes is upon the congregations.
Yeah.
So he sees everything that everybody's
and they'll be
doing.
judged.
They're going to be judged.
They will be
according to what they
judged.
do. And so our stand on it is that we just try to take care of ourselves. And if I know someone is being abused, I'm going to tell it.
Yeah, that's good.
I encouraged somebody yesterday to take steps to stop some abuse that was going on. They called me and told me about it. I said, take the steps, go get the authorities, bring the authorities to the house with you, so that you can stop this.
Good.
And I told them to do that.
And see, that's why I come to talk, because I want that change has to happen from the inside. I'm an outsider now, right? I can't affect jack and crap, right? Like, y'all are going to look at me and be like, who's this worldly guy, right? I was raised in it, so I understand that, right? That's my choice. I walked away. But then, because like one of my favorite quotes throughout history is, all it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing.
Yes. And
so now I'm at the point where, how can I do nothing, right? How can I say nothing? If I knew with how just big of an issue it was where I grew up, the fact I knew all those other kids. Right. But most of the adults didn't know about it. It was us kids talking to each other.
And nobody told it, and you finally told it.
And then when I told, it was swept under the rug. Along with 4 elders' daughters I knew of. Same thing.
Really?
Yep. And like I said, there was about 10, at least 10 I know of.
I do know that the headquarters has instituted some new regulations, some new rules on how to handle things, what to do. Men can no longer be in a room by themselves with the females in the congregation. They've handed down some things in letters to combat a lot of the stuff that had been going on through some of the history.
No, did you ever read or look into the Australian Royal Commission? That was a few years ago. It was case study number 29 in Australia. What happened there is the government of Australia, this is actually happening in the Netherlands now, and Ireland, and the UK, like lots of countries. It's kind of like a congressional committee for our country, where the government investigates different organizations. What it did in Australia, they investigated all major religions. They investigated like daycares, like daycare right there, and big companies, and even Boy Scouts. I mean, they investigated everybody that was big and had a name, right, for their child protection policies. And what they found in Australia is that there was 1,006 pedophiles, and this is with documents they subpoenaed from the JW branch in Australia. 1,006 pedophiles that had gone unreported even during mandatory reporting. Now, they also found between 200 and 300 that had been reported. But so then you have 1,006 pedophiles within Jehovah's Witnesses congregations that were never reported to the police, and that the brothers and sisters didn't know about. And that then, because it wasn't reported, not just in your congregation, but then no one knows that the guy next to him they think is a nice witness is actually a pedophile. You know what I mean? So it's not only just in the congregation, but public safety. And
Let me tell you what we did.
It's so that's
what we did.
Crazy.
What we did is we got this thing where we check the territories out that we work now.
Yes, sir.
And so we go to a website by the state police, and we pull up
Yes,
a file
sir.
on all the pedophiles.
Yes, sir.
We look at all the names and see who's there.
Yep. You need to. You got kids with you going to these doors.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yes,
so
sir. I agree.
had a door that one of the sisters that we just dropped off gave me a name. I went in there and checked that guy's name, and he's a pedophile.
Jeez.
Scratched him right off and put a note in the territory card: do not go to this house.
And see, that is, I'm so, so glad you do that, because that's exactly what you should be doing, right? You know, like, otherwise people like me are going to keep happening. So I'm again, thank you for doing that.
It's
I'm
happening.
glad to hear that, man.
Sometimes things don't happen as fast as they should, but when the report gets big, it goes up to the branch. The branch sends stuff down for us to deal with and takes care of it. So
Oh, and one of the things the Australian Royal Commission brought up was the two-witness rule. I'm sure you're familiar. You sound like you're probably an elder or something.
I used to be.
Used to be? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with the two-witness rule, and they also subpoenaed the Elders Manual, so that's public domain knowledge now, so I've read a lot of that. Like, and on page 72 of the Elders Manual, it says if the pedophile doesn't admit to the abuse, to just leave it in God's hands, to not report it, to just leave it alone.
That's
right?
why I was telling you earlier that the elders can't do much unless they follow that rule, because that's a Bible rule.
But here's the issue. Look at Deuteronomy, it's either 18 or 20, and it says, if a maiden is in a field and she yells out, and no one is there to hear her and to save her from her rapist, is what it's talking about, that you still put that man to death. So even in the Bible, even under that law, under the Mosaic law, right, the Old Covenant, they even had, not the Old Covenant, but you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're talking about.
They even have a provision biblically that you only need one witness, just one. Because how often does a pedophile do it in front of someone, right? And that's where, and I hadn't looked into I hadn't looked into Jehovah's Witnesses for a long time. My mother got back in contact with me a few years ago, and so it brought stuff up, started looking into it, and I watched some of the broadcasts. It was like November broadcasts of the year before last, where it was Brother Gary Bro. I watched it, and he said, "We will never change our two-witness rule." And he read, about bringing two or three Brits with you to establish a matter, but that's not the same as when it talks about in Deuteronomy of a rape. That's going to confront your brother, not necessarily to confront, but like I am with you, like, I have this issue, brother. Let's talk about it. Can we figure this out? And so if it was a serious matter, like if I was a member of this congregation, right? And then I would bring someone with me, just say, hey, let's figure this out together in peace. Let's not have this, because God, one of the things that God hates, it says in, I think, Proverbs, is someone that would cause division among brothers. And that's the last thing it mentions, is someone that would cause division among brothers. So that's for emphasis, right? And so that's why we have, bring more than one person. Let's figure this out. Let's have peace, right? Let's have love. The foremost command is love, right? Like, so let's love each other, And so when he said that, I called my mother up. I was so mad, because I'm like, the two-witness rule is what's getting these kids raped repeatedly. You know what I mean? So then, and that's, now in most cases, I would agree with the two-witness rule, even in courts, right? You can't just say that person stole from me and have no evidence, right? I understand that part. But when it comes to child abuse, child rape, and adult rape, and whatever,
Let me tell you something that happens. And there are children that know what they can do with those accusations. And they don't like their stepdad. He could have never touched them. And they can take that and go to court with it and swear out that this man messed with them, been molesting them for years. That man can get put in jail. He never did it. He can get put in jail, be put on the pedophile list for the rest of his life. Unless that child comes back and later on and say, no, he didn't really do it, then that's where I was mad at him. I didn't like him for coming in my life with my mom or whatever he did, So that's going to be an issue if you don't have any way of showing that this was really done.
And that's why you go to the police immediately. They have rape kits. They can get evidence, because that can be a witness.
Instead of going to the elders,
go to the police.
Go to the police
yes,
and
sir.
report it immediately.
All day long we agree.
And that's the way it should be. And that's my feeling about it. And I know.
Thank you for that, man. That makes me feel better. Thank you.
I watched Brother Jackson, one of the governing body.
Yeah, he testified at the Australian Royal Commission. Yeah.
And they were talking about that case, and he was talking about how there was an accusation, but there was only one person, and the elder judges were like, wait a minute, she came to y'all and told y'all what was going on and blah 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 and all this stuff, and you didn't do nothing about it. You swept it under the rug. And they was like, well, not really, but in essence, Jackson's hands were tied because of the rules that that we have to follow when it comes to someone bringing an accusation. Because if I'm mad at you, I can cause some trouble for you, and you didn't do nothing. You're innocent. I can really, because if you're an elder, I can go to the elders and say, look, I saw him smoking the other day, or I saw him with this woman. They went into this house and the lights went out, and I could be lying. Just completely lying. But if you have two witnesses to this matter, both of y'all saw what happened, then it's established.
And I don't have an issue with that part of it at all. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't be able to just charge someone with a crime just because you say so.
Right.
And even in child abuse, the statistics are, I think it's like less than 2%, because they've kept track of it. And back in like the 80s and 90s, maybe there was more. There was definitely more cases where someone would get accused and go to jail on wrongfully, right?
Right.
But nowadays, they can't be taking shortcuts like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's gotten a lot better in the legal system, at least in this country. I don't know about other countries, but at least in this country, it's gotten a lot better.
Some people in the congregation look at elders as police, but they're not. Don't look at them like that. All they're there for is your spiritual.
Man, I'm so happy to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because that makes me feel better. Because obviously it's something that weighs heavy on me.
Yeah. See, the reason it's close to me, my ex-wife's husband abused his stepdaughter. And so when I met her, she told me the whole story. She went through all this stuff about it.
Yeah.
And me and the stepdaughter now, she's my stepdaughter now, and we're very close. She calls me dad.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But the thing about it is, he was not prosecuted because they would not report it, and she didn't want to report it. The mother did not want to report it. She says because she did not want him to go to jail, but she did want him to be punished in some way, and he did get punished by the congregation, big time. And to this day, years down the road, he cannot do anything in the pulpit. He can't be a minister servant. He can't be around children.
He better not be able to.
Nothing. But he did not.
So he was actually a Jehovah's Witness then.
He was an elder. And so the stuff, like I said, when you mentioned this
so
to
it's
me,
not isolated then.
No, it's not. It happens all over. It's just that it's the way that they go about handling it. My position is the child should have went to the police and let them just say this is what happened.
I think the elders should have gone to the police too.
It's hard for them to go.
Well, because it's not mandatory here. And I understand, but that's where if you apply the scriptures, if you apply the Bible, and you apply what it says in Deuteronomy, then you can go to the police and report it. Because I'm not saying put the guy to death, and I didn't kill my stepfather, to be clear. Like I said, he died. Like, that's a little bit facetious of me. Like, I didn't kill him. He died choking on his own vomit.
Oh.
So, what a way to go, dude. Good luck to you, And real as that verse, it says, better to have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the sea than to stumble on those little ones.
One of the little ones, right.
And look at me now, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, who knows? And so yeah, like well, that's the thing though, for the elders in this area, like if that law goes through the Virginia Senate, that they're going to have to report it now.
We try to abide by the laws, but also we put the scriptures first. And if the branch, they'll look at the law and they'll say, okay, this is what y'all got to do. And they'll write it. They'll make an amendment to the elder book.
Good,
organization
they should,
book,
they
because
should.
they amend it all the time. But I have a copy of it. And
yeah, and like I said, I've read it because it's public domain knowledge now.
but there's a new one. I don't know if you read the new one, but
Shepherd of the Flock.
Yeah, that's the new one.
Yeah, that's the ones that they subpoenaed in multiple court cases around the world. Like I said, I know how to vet intel, so
Okay.
I didn't go on like YouTube. I didn't just go on the internet and just say,
gotta
look at this. I'm
You gotta
like,
go to the source.
not just that, but you also have to know how to verify it, because sometimes the source lies to you, right? Like if you go to a car dealer, you're not going to take his word that car's never been in a flood. You're going to get a Carfax, right? You're going to get someplace that compiles the information. Now, I know you weren't expecting to talk to me. You're probably wanting to get the heck out of here. I want to ask you one thing, and I'll leave you alone, I promise. Because I was talking to my mother about this, and she couldn't give me an answer. Because I do read the Bible. I love the Bible. My relationship with God and Jesus is stronger than it has been at any point in my life. And there's been many times where I should have died, and they came through without a scratch. You know, like, and it's like after at some point, like it starts. You gotta be like, okay, something's happening here. You know what I mean? Like there's too many coincidences. You know what I mean? Like at some point you can be like, it's not a coincidence, dude. It's God helping you out, right? Or guardian angel, whatever you want to call it, right? And I talked to my mother about this. Like I said, she's a Jehovah's Witness still, and she told me to look at some information online. I did at the jw.org and stuff, because I couldn't understand the relationship between her and Jesus, because I read in the Insight books and I read in what's it called, like Peace Prince, or Worldwide Security under the Prince of Peace. That's what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
And it said in there on page 10, it said that Jesus is only the mediator for the 144,000 and not for the great crowd. And it says that in the Insight books under mediator also, it's only for spiritual Israel, which is the 144,000. But then when you look at 1 Timothy 2:5, it says there's that Jesus is the mediator to all mankind, not just a select few. And so I haven't been able to, I even looked on jw.org about that, and I couldn't find a scriptural proof showing that he wasn't the mediator for you and me. You know what I mean? Like, if it says so if you're not anointed, then that's your publication saying Jesus isn't your mediator. Well, then who's your mediator? You can't go before God without one, right? So do you, now saying that, can you help me out with that? Because I don't understand.
Well, I would have to read what you read, because our thought is that Jesus is our mediator. Matter of fact, our prayers end in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, that's the exactly the go-between. Otherwise, why do you pray in His name? Right. Agreed.
Yeah. So, in fact,
I mean, I have 3 references in my head that I've remembered for the last couple years, because when I talked to her, it was a couple years ago, and I haven't been able to figure it out since. If you want, I can write them down for you.
Yeah, do that. And matter of fact, and
you
also
have a pen?
Write down your
pen. Actually, I might.
You got one?
I might have one in my truck. Now this next one's going to take it way back to the day, and I remembered it because April Fools, that made me think. So it's the 1 April, what year was it? 1979.
So you were never baptized?
No, I was. Like I said, I left. I was baptized at 14 while I was still being raped.
Yeah.
And I actually did Pioneer for a couple of years. I went to Pioneer School while I was still being raped. And I started seeing some stuff that didn't quite make sense, and then plus being beaten, raped for a decade messes with your head.
Yeah, that's kind of,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I got baptized because I was expected to, but it meant nothing to me. I remember my mother looking at me. She said to me when I came up out of the water and I walked over to her, she said, "When did you make the truth your own?" And I looked at her like, and I remember her eyes got big because she realized at that moment it meant nothing. But, you know, the weird thing is, I didn't even learn empathy till I was in my probably mid-20s. And it was in the Army with fellow combat vets when a few of them looked at me and they're like, "Dude, you're the coldest MFer I have ever met in my life." And these are guys that have been there and done that. And they're looking at me in shock like, I've never seen someone that cold before. And it took that to wake me up and to help teach me empathy, because I just thought everyone was like me and just didn't give a
care.
Yeah. And so it was That's my son's soccer schedule. Ignore that. That's from last year. But, and I don't really quite know, because I left, like I said, at 16 I left. I left, I just disappeared.
So how do I contact you to discuss these?
Oh, I'll give you my number, man.
Say your name, Will.
Yes, sir. Another thing about Jesus, if you ever want to do some research on why Christians believe in the cross and also believe that Jesus is also God, I can give you some stuff that will blow your mind, historically accurate stuff that will blow your mind on why it is the Christian body outside of Jehovah's Witnesses believes in the cross. Because a sign of a covenant, if you look at the ancient Hebrew pictograms, a sign of a covenant was actually 2 cross sticks. Or also it referred to cutting a covenant. Have you heard the term cutting a covenant?
Cutting a covenant.
It would have been back in ancient Israel, when, let's say, they were going through and conquering Canaan, right? Or not that's not the best example, because they just killed everybody. But let's say they had 2 warring nations, and one king says, okay, I give in. Well, the 2 kings are then going to meet and say, these are the guidelines for our relationship now. And each king, what they'll do is say, I'm going to agree to this contract, this covenant. And what they would do, they would take a bull usually, cut it in half, and put, let's say, like these street lines. They'd cut it in half, right? And they'd put a bull on this side, half the bull on this side. And they would have, it would be longer right here. So they would have some on each side. They'd make a channel, like these white lines, and then where the blood from each half would go in the channel. And then they'd make a central channel and say, and that's where the blood would come together in a central channel. And so it made a cross, right? And that's what cutting a covenant is. And then each king would walk through and say, if I break this covenant, they'd walk through the line of blood. They would say, if I break this covenant, and they would list all kinds of evil stuff. They said, let all these bad things happen to me. Now, both kings would do that, not just the one that won. Because the one that won would say, I'm now going to, you're in fealty to me, but I will take care of you like one of my own. So each king would then walk through that cross, that sign of a covenant. That's what a sign of a covenant is a cross in ancient Hebrew. And they would walk through there and say, we are now bonded to each other in a covenant. And so when you look at the new covenant and a cross, it's not a thing of worship. It's a thing of, this reminds me of God's covenant with me to save my life. No, because I was raised that the cross was not that. That's not what I was taught. You know what I mean? And then if you look at the Tetragrammaton, the Yud He Vav He, you know what I mean by that? Let me see that piece of paper. I want to write something down.
I did a lot of research on that because someone else was talking to me about it. So I did a lot of research on the cross. To go back in ancient times, the way the Romans actually killed people.
Yeah, they started using a cross in the 200 to 300 BC before Christ. It was in the 2nd and 3rd century BCE is when the Romans started using crucifixion. Because on the Appian Way, 70 CE, you know, the Spartacus slave revolt, on the Appian Way for 60 miles, they crucified a slave, I think every 100 feet or 100 meters, 100 meters, I think. Anyway, so they crucified him on cross beams, not a phallic pole, but just like an actual, like a cross. And that's historically accurate from the Appian Way, 70 years before Jesus was born. You know, like, so now the Tetragrammaton with the Y is a Yud, right? Do you know what I mean by Yud? And then what that depicts is a hand. It's usually either a symbol drawn like a backwards F, or it's going to look like a robot hand, like that. And then the He is going to be like that, and it's going to depict either like this, or it's going to be like a stick figure with his arms up. And then the Vav, it's actually a V in Hebrew. And that's going to mean a nail, and it's either going to be like this or like this. So, hand. And the He means to reveal or behold. and I'll leave you alone after this. I know I said one thing. I'm just going to finish this because it's so cool when you look at the history of it. So to reveal or behold. So the vav, that just means nail or tent peg. And then the hey, same thing again. Now, and you can easily double check this. And you can even go to the local Jewish synagogues and ask their rabbis, and they can, you know, if you don't want to look on the internet, go ask a rabbi and he can verify all this for you. And then so what it says is the hand, like sometimes hand and arm, forearm, and then it says reveal, behold. So look at the hand, it's revealed. And then look at the nail, it's revealed. So if you combine that, you make a little stick figure here, and you put the hands, and then you put the tent pegs in it. And then if you want to look at what the covenant is, what a sign for covenant is, it's going to be a cross. So you, the hands, look at the hands. I'm revealing this, behold this. And then the nails, it's going to be like that, nails on the hands, and it is revealed. And then this is the covenant I make with you. And that's a definition I never would have gotten growing up. Nope. But I mean, how, so that would be why a lot of Christians believe in the cross and that he was crucified that way, because even the tetragram, and above him when he was crucified, it had the sign, right? Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Well, the first letter that capitalized each of those words, Yud Hey Vav Hey, YHWH. And now the religious leaders, after that sign was put up, you remember they went back to Cornelius, or was it, I think, or what was his name? Pontius Pilate, rather. They went to Pontius Pilate and said, hey, you need to take the sign down right now. And they're like, why did they care? Everyone knew why Jesus was crucified. Why would the Pharisees have cared that sign was there? Well, the first letter, it said Yahweh above Jesus on the cross. So how crazy is that, right? Like, that's where looking at the historical context, it's like that can bolster your faith, right? Like, look at how connected it is. That we serve a God of order, not disorder, right? And look how much order there is. Now, I'm going to leave you alone. You're probably sick, but listen to me, Rainbow.
No.
But Marvin, thank you for talking to me.
Sure.
And I love knowledge. So if you find something, you want to hit me up,
I will.
send me a text is probably the best way to do that for me.
Okay.
And I would drop some knowledge on me anytime you want, brother.
All right.
And thank you for your
Okay, Will.
thank you for talking to me and the position you take against child molesters.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah. All right.
You have a good one.